My name is Hannah Mitchell. I'm 35 and I serve in the U.S. Army. To my family, though, it's like I've thrown my life away. At our family reunion dinner in Raleigh, my sister leaned back and sneered. Still with that little army job, huh? Laughter exploded around the table from my parents, my aunts, even the cousins. They toasted to her million-dollar deals, her sleek office and rising empire, while I sat there with my medals zipped away in my purse, my chest tight and silent. I've commanded troops in active war zones. I've led operations worth billions. But to them, I'm just playing soldier, some kid stuck in a uniform. They never showed up. Not to my graduation from the academy, not to my promotions, not once. That night, their laughter didn't just sting, it burned. Under the table, I clenched my fist and made a quiet vow I'd make them see me. Not as the daughter they dismiss, not as the sister they overlook, but as the woman they'd never dare to underestimate again. Ever felt invisible to the people who should have believed in you? Most. Tell your story in the comments and subscribe. We rise by proving them wrong. I pulled into Raleigh after a 6-hour drive from Fort Liberty, my stomach twisting with hope and dread. This family reunion was supposed to be different. I'd spent 13 years in the Army leading missions, earning honors, but maybe they'd finally see me. The house was packed, cousins, aunts, uncles, all buzzing with chatter. I walked in wearing civilian jeans to blend in, my service medals tucked away in my purse. My sister Olivia Mitchell stood at the head of the table, her voice sharp and smug. Apex Technologies just landed a $10 million deal, she bragged, flipping her hair. My father, Richard Mitchell, beamed like she'd won a Nobel Prize. "That's my girl running the show," he said, raising his glass. My mother, Patricia Mitchell, nodded, her smile wide. "Olivia's making us proud," she added, her eyes locked on her. I sat quietly, picking at my food, waiting for a chance to speak. "Hey, I just led a major mission overseas," I said, my voice steady but hopeful, thinking they'd care. Olivia snorted, cutting me off. "What, still playing with your little army job?" The table erupted in laughter. Dad chuckled. Mom shook her head. My cousins smirked like I was a kid with a toy gun. My face burned, but I forced a tight smile, gripping my fork until my knuckles whitened. Olivia leaned forward, her eyes glinting with mockery. "Come on, Hannah. When are you getting a real career? You know, one that pays real money." Dad jumped in, not missing a beat. "She's right. Apex is working with the Department of Defense now. Big leagues, Hannah." He didn't know I was overseeing their contract from the Army's side. Neither did Olivia. They never asked. Mom turned to me, her tone sharp as a blade. "Hannah, why can't you be more like Olivia? She's building something real, not chasing badges." I swallowed hard, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. The room felt like it was closing in, their voices louder, their laughter sharper. I was invisible, a seasoned officer reduced to a punchline in my own family. Olivia raised her glass again, her smirk aimed right at me. To Apex and to family success, she toasted. Everyone clinked glasses, their cheers echoing. I stared at my plate, my anger simmering, a fire growing inside me. I'd led teams through war zones, made decisions that saved lives while they toasted Olivia's bank account. They thought I was nothing. I wasn't their little Hannah anymore. I'd show them, not with words, not with tears, but with action. I pushed my chair back, my jaw set. This wasn't over. I'd make them see who I was, and it wouldn't be at this table. As I pushed my chair back from that suffocating reunion table, my mind spiraled into the past, to the moments that carved this ache in my chest. I was 22, standing tall at my West Point graduation, my uniform crisp, my heart pounding with pride. I'd scanned the crowd for familiar faces, Dad, Mom, Olivia, but the seats I'd reserved for them were empty. I'd sent them invitations, called twice to confirm. "We're tied up with Olivia's pitch meeting," Mom had said, her voice clipped. "It's a big deal, Hannah." I stood alone, clapping for my classmates, my smile hiding the sting. They never came. Not one. Years later, at 26, I earned my first major promotion, a milestone I'd dreamed of since I was a kid. I'd invited my family to the ceremony at Fort Bragg, hoping they'd see what I'd built. I waited by the stage, scanning the crowd, my hands sweaty. No one showed. Olivia texted last minute, stuck at a client dinner. "You'll be fine." Dad didn't even call back. Mom sent a card addressed to Hannah, no mention of my rank or achievement. I pinned the new insignia on my uniform alone, my chest tight with a familiar hurt. They were always too busy with Olivia's deals, her promotions, her life. The deepest cut came at 29, deployed in Syria. I was leading a critical operation, days without sleep, my team relying on me. I got a rare chance to call home, hoping to hear Dad's voice, maybe Mom's encouragement. I dialed from a dusty outpost, the connection crackling. Dad picked up, sounding distracted. "Hannah, can it wait? Olivia's closing a major contract today." Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone, my throat burning. My work grueling, life or death missions didn't matter to them. Olivia's boardroom victories always came first. I'd tried so hard to make them proud. At 24, I sent Mom a photo of me receiving a commendation for a cyber operation. She replied, "Nice, but Olivia just got featured in Forbes." At 30, I told Dad about a successful mission that saved lives. He said, "That's great, but Olivia's running a team of 50 now." Every achievement I shared was overshadowed by Olivia's success. They never asked about my work, never visited my base, never cared. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but all I got was silence or comparisons. Back then, I'd blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe my path, grit, sacrifice, service wasn't flashy like Olivia's corner office. But that night in Raleigh, as their laughter from the reunion echoed in my head, I saw it clearly. It wasn't me. It was them. They chose Olivia's world money status deals over mine. I'd carried that weight for years, each missed milestone a scar. But I wasn't that hopeful kid anymore. I'd built a life, a career, a purpose. They'd never see it, not at my graduations, not at my ceremonies, not over that crackling call from Syria. But I'd make them see it now, not for their love, but for me. The weight of those old scars from graduations and missed calls still lingered as I drove to my parents' house a week after the reunion. I wanted to try one last time to bridge the gap. In my bag was a service medal earned during a high-stakes mission overseas, one of my proudest moments. I'd carried it for months, hoping to share it with Dad to show him what I'd built. Maybe this time, they'd see me. I pulled up to their Raleigh home, my heart pounding with a flicker of hope. Inside, the living room was quiet. Just Dad, Mom, and my sister Olivia Mitchell sipping coffee. I took a deep breath and sat down, clutching the small velvet box. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I brought something for you." I opened the box, revealing the medal, its silver glinting faintly. "This is from a mission I led last year. It means a lot to me." I slid it toward him, my eyes searching his face. Richard Mitchell glanced at it, then pushed it back across the table. "Hannah, that's nice," he said, his tone flat, "but I don't need trinkets. Olivia's got a big presentation with Apex tomorrow. That's what matters." My chest tightened, but I kept my face, still hoping Mom would say something. Patricia Mitchell barely looked at the medal. "Hannah, honestly," she said, her voice sharp, "why do you keep bringing up this army stuff? Olivia's closing deals that actually change things." She gestured to my sister, who smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, Hannah." Olivia said, her eyes narrowing. "Maybe save the medals for your scrapbook. I'm pitching to the Department of Defense tomorrow. Real impact." They didn't know I was the officer overseeing Apex's contract, that my work shaped their so-called real impact. I clenched my jaw, the rejection stinging like a slap. I tried again, turning to Dad. "This isn't just a medal," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It's for saving lives, for work I poured everything into." He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Olivia's work keeps the lights on," he said, not meeting my eyes. Mom nodded, adding, "You should focus on something practical like Olivia does." The room felt smaller, their words cutting deeper than any mission I'd faced. Olivia laughed a short, mocking sound. "Hannah? You're wasting your time? Stick to your little army games." I stared at the metal, its weight heavy in my hands. I'd thought it could change things, make them see me not just as their daughter or sister, but as someone who'd built something real. But they didn't care. They never would. Their world revolved around Olivia's deals, her status, her bank account. My service, my sacrifices were invisible to them. I closed the box, my fingers trembling, and stood up. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "You don't want this. I'll show you what I'm worth another way." I walked out, their silence following me. That moment broke something inside me, not my resolve, but my need for their approval. I wasn't chasing their pride anymore. I'd prove my value not with gifts or words, but with my actions, my career, my strength. They'd see me not here, not now, but soon, on my terms. I left my parents' house with the medal still in my bag, its weight a reminder of their rejection, but also of my resolve. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd prove my worth through my work. Back at Fort Liberty, I threw myself into my role as an officer, determined to rise above the sting of their words. My days were filled with high-stakes cyber operations, each one a test of skill and grit. But one mission, a critical network security audit, became my breaking point. I was tasked with leading a team to secure a classified system for a Department of Defense project. The deadline was tight, the stakes enormous. One flaw could compromise national security. I'd spent weeks preparing running simulations, double-checking code. But during the final audit, a hidden vulnerability slipped through, crashing the system in front of my team and our evaluators. The room went quiet, my stomach dropping as the screen flashed red. I'd failed publicly, spectacularly. My team looked to me, waiting for direction, but I froze, the weight of my family's dismissal echoing in my head. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe I wasn't enough. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the failed audit report, my confidence shattered. I was ready to call it quits when Colonel James Parker, my mentor, walked in. "Hannah," he said, his voice steady. "You're not the first to stumble, and you won't be the last." He sat down, his eyes sharp but kind. "Failure doesn't define you. It's what you do next." I shook my head, my voice tight. "Colonel Parker." I let everyone down. This was my shot. He leaned forward, unyielding. "You think I got these eagles without screwing up? You fix it. You learn, you keep going. That's leadership." His words hit hard. I'd spent years proving myself to a family that didn't care, but here was someone who saw my potential. Over the next week, Colonel Parker worked with me, dissecting the audit, pinpointing the flaw, a subtle coding error I'd overlooked. We rebuilt the system line by line, testing it until it was ironclad. He didn't sugarcoat my mistakes, but he didn't let me drown in them either. "You're tougher than this, Hannah," he said during one late-night session. "Show them what you're made of, not your family, but yourself." When we ran the audit again, the system held. The evaluators nodded, my team cheered, and I felt a spark of pride I hadn't known in years. Colonel Parker clapped me on the shoulder. "That's the officer I know," he said. I wasn't just fixing code, I was rebuilding myself. I realized then that my family's rejection didn't define me. Their words, Olivia's smirks, Dad's shrugs, Mom's comparisons were noise. My work, my growth, my strength were what mattered. That victory at Fort Liberty wasn't just about the audit. It was about learning to stand up after a fall, to lead through doubt, to trust my own worth. Colonel Parker didn't just help me fix a system, he showed me I could fix myself. I wasn't done proving my value, not to my family, but to the world I'd built here. I'd keep pushing, keep leading, keep fighting, and I'd do it for me. The victory at Fort Liberty had reignited my fire, but as December rolled in, a quiet ache settled in my chest. Christmas was coming, and the thought of another holiday with my family's judgment, Olivia's smirks, Dad's shrugs. Mom's comparisons felt unbearable. I needed something else, something real. That's when Colonel James Parker, my mentor, invited me to his family's Christmas dinner. "You're not spending the holidays alone, Hannah," he said, his voice firm. I hesitated, but his insistence won me over. I arrived at Colonel Parker's house near Fort Liberty, my nerves buzzing. Susan Parker, his wife, greeted me at the door with a warm smile. "Hannah, come in," she said, pulling me into a hug that caught me off guard. The house was filled with laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to the cold silence of my family's reunion. At the table sat Brian Carter, my teammate from the cyber unit, his grin wide as he waved me over. "About time you showed up," he teased, passing me a plate. I sat down, my shoulders easing for the first time in weeks. Colonel Parker raised a glass, his eyes steady. "To the team," he said, "and to those who've got your back." I clinked glasses with them, a warmth spreading through me. Susan leaned over, her voice soft. "Hannah James talks about you all the time. Your family here." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Family. A word I'd chased for years, only to find it here, not in Raleigh, with Olivia's taunts or Mom's lectures. Brian shared stories of our missions, exaggerating my role in the audit fix to make me laugh. "Hannah saved the day," he said, winking. I shook my head, but Susan squeezed my hand. "You're tougher than you let on," she said. Colonel Parker nodded, adding, "She's one of the best. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Their words hit deeper than I expected, filling a void my family had left. For years, I'd fought for Dad's pride, Mom's approval, Olivia's respect. But here with these people, I didn't have to prove anything. They saw me, my work, my heart, my strength. As the night went on, we swapped stories, Colonel Parker's early deployments, Susan's knack for keeping him grounded, Brian's ridiculous pranks on base. I shared a little about my missions, careful not to dwell on the pain of my family's rejection. "You ever think about going back?" Brian asked, his tone gentle. I paused, then shook my head. "They don't get it," I said. "But you all do." Susan smiled, refilling my glass. "You've got us now," she said. I felt a weight lift, a sense of belonging I hadn't known I needed. By the end of the night, I wasn't just an officer or a name on a roster. I was part of something bigger, a family that chose me, not because of blood, but because of who I was. Colonel Parker walked me out, his voice low. "Hannah, you're stronger than you know. Keep pushing." I nodded, my heart full. I'd spent too long chasing a family that didn't see me. Now I had one that did. And that was enough. The sense of belonging I'd found with Colonel Parker and my team fueled me as I dove into my biggest assignment yet. At Fort Liberty, I was tasked with overseeing a billion-dollar cybersecurity project for the Department of Defense, a contract tied to Apex Technologies, my sister's company. My role was to ensure their systems met the military's stringent standards: no leaks, no flaws, no compromises. The responsibility was immense, but after the audit victory, I felt ready. I led a team of analysts running tests, reviewing code, and coordinating with Apex's engineers. Every decision I made carried weight, and I thrived on the challenge, knowing this project could shape national security. Weeks into the project, I got a call from my mother, Patricia Mitchell. Her voice was tense, not warm. "Hannah, we need to talk," she said. I braced myself, expecting another lecture about Olivia's success. "Olivia's struggling with her Apex contract," Mom went on. "It's with the Department of Defense." "You're in the Army, can't you pull some strings?" I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. They didn't know I was the officer overseeing that very contract. I kept my tone even. "Mom, I don't do favors like that. My job is to protect the system, not bend rules." She sighed, exasperated. "Hannah, just help your sister. This is her big break." I hung up, my jaw clenched. The next day, my father, Richard Mitchell, called. "Hannah, Olivia's under pressure," he said, his voice heavy with expectation. "You're in the military. Do something to make this easier for her. I stared at my desk papers stacked with Apex's system specs. Dad? I said, my voice firm. I can't. My work doesn't work that way. He scoffed. You're always so rigid. Olivia's carrying the family name. Help her out. I ended the call, my heart pounding. They thought my job was a tool for Olivia's success, not a career I'd built through years of sacrifice. Then Olivia herself texted. Hey Hannah, I know you're with the Army. Can you talk to whoever's in charge of our DoD contract? It's a mess. Her casual tone, like she was asking for a coffee order, made my blood boil. I typed back, Olivia, I don't interfere with contracts. Fix it yourself. She replied with a single word, whatever. I set my phone down, my hands shaking. For years they'd dismissed my work as a little Army job, and now they wanted me to use it to save Olivia's reputation. The irony burned. Back at Fort Liberty, I doubled down on the project. Apex's systems had vulnerabilities, sloppy code, weak encryption that my team flagged. I sent detailed reports to their engineers expecting cooperation. Instead, their lead engineer, unaware I was the oversight officer, pushed back, citing unnecessary delays. I stood my ground, insisting on fixes. My team worked late nights, stress high but morale steady. I wasn't just doing my job, I was proving my worth not to my family, but to myself and the mission. One evening, Colonel James Parker stopped by my office. Heard you're catching heat from Apex, he said, leaning against the doorframe. I nodded, exhausted. They're not happy with my standards. He chuckled. Good. Keep them honest, Hannah. You're doing what's right. His words steadied me. My family saw my work as a favor to leverage. Colonel Parker saw it as duty. I wasn't bending for Olivia or anyone else. As the project neared its deadline, I knew the real test was coming. Apex's leadership, including Olivia, would present their system at a conference in Raleigh. My team's findings would be front and center, and I'd be there to ensure the truth came out. I wasn't helping Olivia, I was holding her accountable. My family's requests had shown me one thing: they'd never respect my work until it stared them in the face. I was ready to show them, not with favors, but with results. The conference hall in Raleigh buzzed with anticipation as I adjusted my uniform, medals pinned carefully to my chest. Months of grueling work on the Apex Technologies cybersecurity project had led to this moment. I wasn't here to help my sister Olivia Mitchell as my family had demanded. I was here to do my job, to ensure the system was secure, no matter whose name was on it. My team's findings, detailed in a report I clutched tightly, exposed critical flaws in Apex's work. I took a deep breath, ready to face the room, knowing my family would be there, oblivious to my role. The hall was packed with Apex executives, Department of Defense officials, and my family seated near the front. Olivia stood at the podium, her smile confident as she presented Apex's system as flawless. My father, Richard Mitchell, and my mother, Patricia Mitchell, beamed from their seats, whispering proudly about her success. I stayed in the back, unnoticed, my heart steady but my nerves electric. Olivia's slides flashed across the screen, boasting unbreakable encryption and military-grade security. I clenched my report, knowing the truth. When Olivia finished, the room applauded. Thomas Reed, Apex's CEO, stepped forward to introduce the military's evaluation. We're honored to have the officer overseeing this contract here, he said, scanning the room. I stepped forward, my boots clicking on the floor, my uniform crisp. The room turned to me, and Thomas Reed's face lit up. He stood, saluted, and said, Colonel, welcome. The words hung in the air, sharp and clear. A gasp rippled through the crowd. My family froze. Olivia's jaw dropped. Dad's eyes widened. Mom's hands gripped her chair. Colonel. The title they'd never heard, never cared to know, now echoed in the silence. I nodded to Thomas Reed and took the podium. Thank you, Mr. Reed. I said, my voice calm but firm. My team conducted a thorough review of Apex's system. I opened my report, projecting the findings on the screen. We identified multiple vulnerabilities, weak encryption, outdated protocols, and unsecured access points. These flaws pose significant risks to national security. The room stirred murmurs growing. Olivia's face went pale, her confidence crumbling. I didn't look at her. This wasn't personal. It was my duty. An executive interrupted his tone, defensive. These standards are excessive, he said. I held his gaze. They're necessary, I replied. My job is to protect our nation's systems, not to cut corners. Thomas Reed nodded, his expression serious. Colonel Mitchell, we appreciate your rigor. Apex will address these issues immediately. Olivia sank into her seat, her hands trembling. Dad and Mom stared at me, their pride for Olivia replaced by shock. They'd called my work a little army job, but now they saw the truth. As I stepped down, Olivia approached, her voice low and shaky. Hannah, you could have warned me, she said. I met her eyes, unyielding. Olivia, I told you to fix it yourself. My job isn't to save your reputation, it's to do what's right. She flinched, speechless. Dad stood, his face red. Hannah, why didn't you tell us, he asked. I paused, my chest tight. I tried, I said. You never listened. Mom reached out, her voice soft. Hannah, we didn't know. I shook my head. You didn't want to know. The conference moved on, but the air between us was heavy. My family sat in stunned silence as Thomas Reed thanked me again, his respect clear. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but in that moment I didn't need it. I'd proven my worth not to them but to myself, my team, and the mission. As I left the hall, my medals glinting under the lights, I felt lighter. Their shock was their burden, not mine. I was ready for what came next. Walking out of the Raleigh conference hall, the weight of my family's stunned silence lingered behind me. Their shock at hearing Colonel welcome wasn't my victory. It was just the final push I needed. For years I'd carried their dismissal, their preference for my sister Olivia Mitchell, like a stone in my chest. But standing there with my medals glinting and my duty clear, I knew it was time to let go. I drove to my parents' house that evening, my resolve firm, ready to say what I'd held back for too long. I found my father, Richard Mitchell, and my mother, Patricia Mitchell, in their living room, still reeling from the conference. Olivia sat across from them, her face tight with frustration. I stood in the doorway, my uniform still on, my voice steady. I'm done, I said. For years I tried to make you see me, my work, my sacrifices. But you never did. You chose Olivia's world over mine every time. Dad's face hardened. Hannah, we didn't know you were a colonel, he said, his tone defensive. I shook my head. You didn't know because you never asked. Olivia stood, her voice sharp. Hannah, you embarrassed me today, she said. You could have helped me, but you threw me under the bus. I met her gaze, unflinching. Olivia, I did my job. You wanted favors, not fairness. That's not who I am. Mom reached out, her eyes pleading. Hannah, we're family. We can fix this. But her words felt hollow. No, Mom, I said, my throat tight. Family doesn't ignore you, belittle you, or demand you bend your principles. I'm done chasing your approval. The silence that followed was heavy, final. I turned and walked out, their voices fading behind me. That night, I packed my things and made a decision. Fort Liberty had been my home, but a new assignment was waiting in Arlington, Virginia, near the Pentagon. It was a fresh start, a chance to build a life free from the shadows of their expectations. By week's end, I'd loaded my car and driven north, the Raleigh skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. Arlington felt different, open, unburdened. I settled into a small apartment, my medals and commendations arranged on a shelf, not for anyone else, but for me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, leading cybersecurity initiatives with a clarity I hadn't felt before. I thought about Colonel James Parker, my mentor, who'd seen my strength when my family couldn't. I thought about Susan Parker, his wife, and my teammate Brian Carter, who'd welcomed me as family at that Christmas dinner. They were the ones who mattered, the ones who'd chosen me, not out of obligation, but because they saw who I was. My family's absence no longer stung. It was their loss, not mine. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. My worth wasn't in their praise or Olivia's shadow. It was in the missions I'd led, the lives I'd protected, the team I'd built. I'd spent years thinking I needed their validation to feel whole, but I was whole all along. My strength, my purpose, my life. They were mine, forged through every challenge, every choice, every step I took alone. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. Thank you to Colonel Parker, Susan, and Brian for showing me what family really means. Thank you to my team at Fort Liberty for standing by me. And thank you to all of you listening for being part of this story. If it resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me what's your story of finding your worth. I'm reading everyone.
The second I said the word pregnant, my mother stepped back like I'd spat blood on her white rug. My father didn't speak. He didn't look at me. He just walked into the kitchen, poured himself a drink, and turned on the news like I hadn't just set my whole future on fire. I was 19, 2 semesters into college, top of my class, no history of rebellion, just one secret I couldn't hide anymore, and it was growing inside me. I won't raise a whore, my mother snapped. Her hand trembled, but her voice didn't. She always knew how to cut without flinching. You'll leave this house tonight. I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. She tossed a suitcase on the floor, half packed with clothes she picked for me. Didn't even let me finish folding mine. No goodbye hug. No tears. Just judgment. And one final sentence as I stood in the doorway. Whatever happens next, you brought it on yourself. My father's eyes never left the television. They told neighbors I ran away. Told the pastor I had mental health struggles. Told my cousins they'd tried everything, but I was beyond saving. In their version, they were the victims. And I was the cautionary tale. I didn't fight it, because they didn't deserve the truth. They didn't deserve to know who the father was. That he wasn't some boy from campus or a fling I couldn't forget. No, the father of my children was Elias, Crown Prince of Arundel, next in line to a throne older than the country my parents clung to so tightly. He had asked me to marry him. Twice. I had said no. Twice. Not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to see what I could survive without him first. That night, I slept in the back of a friend's car, one hand over my belly, the other gripping the tiny silver bracelet Elias gave me. He didn't know yet. I hadn't told him. I wanted to wait. I wanted the story to be mine first. People love to talk about shame. They love to watch it cling to you like a wet dress, heavy and humiliating. They love a girl with her head down, a girl whose story ends the moment her reputation cracks. But I wasn't a tragedy. I was a seed, and all they did was bury me deeper. My name is Layla James, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because the child they called a scandal became royalty, and the daughter they kicked out? She came back with a crown they could never touch. The day after they threw me out, my mother posted a photo on Facebook. Her and my father at brunch, smiling, mimosas, filtered sunlight, caption, sometimes letting go is the only way to heal. Please keep us in your prayers. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Her inbox filled with sympathy. So sorry for what you're going through. You raised her right. Sometimes kids just stray. She'll come back when she's ready to apologize. Apologize for what? For getting pregnant? For not being perfect? For not bleeding quietly? They didn't just kick me out, they erased me. I stayed quiet. I watched from a distance as they turned my life into a cautionary tale. They told my childhood friends I dropped out, told family that I was struggling with substances. My aunt even texted me once, "We love you, but your mom says you're not safe right now. Let us know when you get clean." I was 5 months pregnant, living in a shelter, going to work every day with swollen ankles and no one to call. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the ultrasound photo, tag them all, and write, "Here's the child you disowned, the one with royal blood." But I didn't, because I wasn't going to waste truth on people addicted to their own lies. Elias offered to step in. When I finally told him, he was silent for a long time. Then he said they don't deserve to know. But if you want them to, I'll fly there tomorrow. I said no. I wasn't ready to be the girl on the news. I wasn't ready for the world to look at me and say, she got lucky. Because it wasn't luck that got me through those nights. It was grit, hunger, stubborn hope. I worked double shifts at a hotel front desk, then folded sheets in the laundry room on weekends. I slept on a mattress with no frame and read baby books under the light of a phone screen. Every time someone looked at my stomach and made a face, I smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew what my parents had thrown away. Not just their daughter, but the future queen mother of a dynasty older than their judgment. I didn't speak up. Not because I was weak. Because I was waiting. Let them call me a failure. Let them preach forgiveness while they nailed me to a cross they built out of pride and fear. The longer they lied, the quieter I became. And the quieter I became, the more dangerous the truth grew. Because when it finally came out, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would bury theirs. I didn't tell Elias everything at first. He knew I was gone, knew my parents had reacted badly, but I kept the details vague. I didn't want him to see me like that, bruised not from violence but from being unwanted. We'd met during the study abroad program. I was tutoring international students in advanced literature. He was just Eli then, a quiet guy with perfect posture and eyes that listened before his mouth did. When I found out who he really was, His Royal Highness Elias of Arundel, he smiled and said, "Does it change anything?" It should have, but it didn't. He loved books. I loved silence. We both hated cameras. We were just easy. He wasn't supposed to fall for me, and I wasn't supposed to fall pregnant. But here we were. When I told him I was having twins, he cried. Not out of fear, out of awe. He placed both hands on my stomach and whispered, "They'll have your fire." I almost told him to come rescue me, to take me home, to bring me into the palace and let the world see I wasn't what my family made me out to be. But I didn't, because I needed to know what I was made of without a title behind my name. So he kept it quiet. He wired money once for medical bills. I sent it back. He offered a private doctor. I refused. "I need to do this first," I said. "For me." He didn't argue. He just said, "Then when you're ready, I'll be waiting." Some nights, I questioned it all. Was I stupid for walking away from a literal palace? Was I punishing myself to prove a point to people who weren't even watching? But then I'd feel one of them kick, or I'd hear both heartbeats in the sonogram room, and I'd remember I wasn't alone. Not anymore. My children would grow up knowing who they were. Not just royal, not just heirs, but survivors, born of grit, not just blood. My parents thought they'd ended my story, but I was just beginning to write the part they'd never be allowed to read. When I gave birth in a public hospital, there were no royal doctors, no golden cribs, no silk, just me, sweat-soaked and sobbing, whispering their names into the world. Leora, Thane, two perfect souls with royal blood and a mother who had learned to kneel for no one. When I held them, something inside me shifted. I didn't just survive them. I became undeniable. And whether the world found out tomorrow or 10 years from now, the truth was coming. And when it did, the people who called me shameful would have to bow to what I brought into this world. There was no fairy tale beginning. No red carpet rolled out when I brought the twins home. Just a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery, a second-hand crib I painted myself, and lullabies sung over the hum of a broken radiator. It was hard, the kind of hard no one claps for. But it was mine. I took on night shifts, answering phones at a taxi dispatch, cleaned offices on weekends, sold handmade baby wraps on Etsy in between feedings. And when the twins napped, I studied business, branding, supply chains. I taught myself what no one ever thought I'd need to know, how to build something that couldn't be taken away. I refused to let their legacy start with struggle. And slowly, the struggle started shifting. One sale turned into 10. 10 turned into 100. Elias watched it all unfold from afar. He didn't interfere. He supported the way I asked him to, quietly, respectfully, with faith. When the babies turned 1, he called me with news. The palace is ready. And so am I. The council agrees they must be acknowledged. I stood there with a dish towel in my hand, not sure how to breathe. Layla, he said gently, you're not a secret anymore. You're a story, a name, and our children deserve their place in it. I didn't answer right away, not because I doubted him, but because I wanted to walk into that next chapter with a spine stiff from standing tall, not from being carried. So I told him, give me 6 months. In that time, I opened a tiny studio space downtown, half office, half nursery. Started a brand around the wraps I used to sew by hand, twine and grace, a symbol of everything I'd done with nothing but thread and willpower. When the first press piece came out, Single Mom Side Hustle supports hundreds of families, it wasn't about royalty. It wasn't about revenge. It was about work, about a woman who had been thrown out with nothing but her name and turned it into something worth remembering. And just as that article made its rounds, the invitation arrived, a gold-trimmed envelope with the Arundel crest, sealed and formal. No public announcement yet, just the first step, an official press conference. The world would finally know who the twins were, who I was, not as a girl who made a mistake, but as the woman the future bowed to. I thought about my parents, the way they'd shamed me, discarded me, lied to protect their pride. And I smiled, because soon they wouldn't be able to lie anymore. Soon, everyone would know the truth they tried to erase. And I wouldn't have to say a word. The press conference was held in the palace's east garden. Cameras lined the marble path. Guards stood like statues. There were whispers, rumors, tabloid guesses. No one knew exactly what to expect until I stepped forward. I wore a deep blue dress, not flashy, not screaming for attention, just elegant, soft, steady. Leora stood beside me, clutching my hand. Thane sat on Elias's hip, staring curiously at the microphones. The king and queen were there, not stiff or wary warm, welcoming, because by the time the press release was written, they already knew me. Not as a scandal, but as family. The queen had held my hand 2 weeks earlier and said, you protected them before we even knew they existed. That's not shameful. That's royal. And now the world was about to learn that. Elias cleared his throat, stepped forward and smiled. Today, we introduce to you the future of Arundel. Our children, our family, Crown Princess Leora James of Arundel, Crown Prince Thane James of Arundel, and the woman whose strength brought them into this world, Layla James. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then flashes exploded. Reporters gasped. A few called out questions, but none of them mattered, because the story was already written. They were royal, and I was the mother of heirs. The moment went viral in under an hour. Clips played on every news network. Old photos of me resurfaced. People began piecing together timelines. And then came the second wave, the unraveling. A journalist from back home dug into the family history, discovered the public Facebook post from my mother, the brunch photo, the false narrative. An anonymous source confirmed my parents' lie, how they kicked me out, covered it up, spread rumors about addiction and mental illness to keep themselves clean. Their neighbors saw the news. Their church saw the press release. And suddenly, the very people they tried to impress were asking them one question. Is it true? They tried to spin it, tried to say I cut them off first. But truth doesn't need a defense when the whole world can see it. One aunt emailed me, I'm so sorry. I believed them. I shouldn't have. You look powerful. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The best part? I didn't say a single negative word about them. I never mentioned their names. Never corrected their stories with rage. I let the truth walk in the front door and sit down at their dinner table uninvited. And it spoke louder than I ever could. They tried to bury me in shame. But now the world was bowing, not to a scandal, to me. The first time I saw them again was at a charity gala. Not because they were invited, they weren't. Because they showed up, unannounced, uninvited, unchanged. The event was a fundraiser for single mothers in crisis. My name was on the banner, and Leora had just handed a bouquet to one of the organizers. That's when I saw them. My parents, standing at the edge of the crowd, holding glasses of wine they didn't pay for, My mother wore pearls again, like they made her forgiven. My father's suit didn't fit quite right, like pride doesn't sit well on an empty stomach. They looked older, thinner, tired, like people who had been clinging to status with fingers they no longer had strength to close. I turned slightly, made eye contact, didn't move. My mother came to me first. She walked like she expected cameras, smiled like the room still belonged to her. When she reached me, she took my hand. You look stunning, sweetheart. Just radiant. I didn't speak. She cleared her throat. We saw the press conference. The twins. The prince. It's all just. She stopped, looking for the right word. Surreal. My father hovered nearby, hands behind his back like a scolded schoolboy. We didn't know Layla, my mother said. We thought you were lost, that you were angry. You cut us off. I finally spoke. You threw me out. She blinked, like that wasn't the line she'd rehearsed for. And you told the world I ran away, I added. You lied to everyone. You told them I was unstable. Her voice dropped. We were scared. You have to understand. No, I said. I really don't. She reached for my hand again. I pulled it back. We've lost everything, she said quietly. The house, the business, friends. Her voice cracked. We just want to be part of your life again, of their lives. She meant Leora and Thane. My children, the ones she never asked about, the ones she would have let grow up thinking their mother was worthless. I looked at her, then at my father, who still hadn't spoken, and I smiled, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood. They hadn't come for love. They'd come for proximity to power, and I would never let them close enough to steal it. So I turned back toward the photographer and took a photo with a woman from the shelter I'd once stayed in. The camera clicked. The moment passed, and I walked away, heels silent on the marble floor, heart loud in my chest. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat beside my children while they slept and whispered the one thing I never got from my parents. You are not what the world calls you. You are what you rise from. I sent the letter because I needed to write it. Not for them, for me. It wasn't long. Just one page. No dramatic punctuation. No angry spirals of ink. Just words I had waited years to say in the simplest way I could. You were ashamed of what I carried. But now the world calls them royalty. And they call me Mom. That was the opening line. I didn't mention how they kicked me out. Didn't rehash the cold goodbye or the way my father stared at the TV instead of at me. Didn't bother reminding them how my mother said, You brought this on yourself. They remembered. They just thought time would make me forget. But time did something better. It made me powerful, and it gave me clarity. I ended the letter with, You chose distance when love was needed most. Now I'm choosing distance, not from hate, but peace. Some doors closed quietly. This is one of them. I sealed the envelope. No return address. Handed it to my assistant with instructions to mail it through a third party. Not because I was hiding. Because I was done. I watched her walk out with it. And then I tore up my personal copy and tossed the pieces into the fireplace. I didn't need to keep a record. What they'd done would never be forgotten. But I wouldn't let it shape me anymore. A week later, a royal portrait was taken. Elias, Leora, Thane, and me. Our first official photo as a family. I stood beside them, head high, shoulders back, nothing small or quiet about me anymore. The caption from a major news outlet read, From exile to empire, Layla James, the quiet rise of a royal mother. My parents never reached out again. I imagine they read the articles, watched the interviews, maybe even saw me on television, standing behind Elias at a state dinner, listening to him introduce policy on education reform. But they didn't get to be part of it. Not this life. Not this joy. Not this throne. They stood on the outside of a kingdom they would never be allowed to enter. Because forgiveness does not always mean access. And grace does not mean returning to the people who taught you shame. I forgave them, yes, but I didn't open the door. And I never will. The palace grounds are quiet in the mornings. Too early for staff. Too late for guards to be alert. Just the rustle of wind through the ivy and the patter of 2 sets of small feet on cobblestone. Leora picks dandelions with the seriousness of a scholar. Thane chases birds with the clumsy joy only toddlers can get away with. And I sit on the stone bench beneath the fig tree, watching the children they tried to erase grow into royalty. It's not revenge, I feel. It's something gentler, heavier too. Peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from no longer needing to remember. Sometimes staff ask if I want security to block press access on days like this. I always say no. Let them see. Let the world watch this quiet miracle. The girl they discarded, raising a crown that doesn't glitter with gold, but with grit. There's a room inside the palace they built just for me. Not a queen's chamber, not an office, a study. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, a writing desk, a window that opens toward the eastern sky. I spend my nights there sometimes, journaling. Not about the past, that chapter is closed, but about the future, about what I want my children to inherit, beyond land and name and legacy. I want them to inherit truth, to know that strength isn't always loud. That being chosen by someone else will never matter more than choosing yourself. That sometimes the family you need is the one you build, not the one you're born into. And that royalty isn't about bloodlines. It's about what you carry with grace, even when no one believed you could. Leora calls out, "Mom, look!" She holds up a crooked flower crown. Thane squeals and runs in circles, arms out like wings. I rise from the bench and walk toward them. Not a queen, not a cautionary tale, just a mother who did the impossible. And as I bend down, tuck the crown onto Leora's curls and kiss her forehead, I think. They bowed to the crown. But the crown? It came from me, tied with a velvet ribbon. Inside was a sealed envelope, neatly folded. 3 months of fully covered rent. I handed it to my sister with a quiet smile. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be. Just a small act of relief for her. Someone who'd been struggling, according to every whispered conversation my mother had dropped in my lap over the last few weeks. Rachel opened the envelope, slowly, read the card, looked at the check, then looked up at me, loud enough for the whole family to hear. Tries to compensate for the fact that she's not needed by this family. The room went still. Then someone, I think my cousin, let out a laugh. And then the rest joined in. The kind of laughter that doesn't just sting, it slices. I felt it hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I reached forward, plucked the envelope right back from Rachel's hands, tucked it into my coat pocket and said, "Useful to know. No yelling, no drama, just truth." 10 minutes later, I was walking toward the door when I heard someone say, "Wait, Emily, seriously, don't be like that." Then another voice, my mother's. "Emily, please, just come back. Let's talk." By the time I shut the front door behind me, the whole house was shouting, "Please listen to US." But I didn't, because for once I was listening to myself. My name is Emily Carter, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because the night they laughed at my kindness was the same night they stopped laughing altogether. I've always been the dependable one, not the loudest, not the favorite, just the one everyone could count on. When Rachel totaled her car in college, I co-signed the loan for the new one. When Dad's small business hit a rough patch, I quietly wired money from my savings. When Mom needed help planning Grandma's funeral, I took unpaid leave to arrange everything. No one asked if I could afford it. No one checked to see how I was doing. They just assumed I'd handle it, because that's what I'd always done. The invisible daughter, the steady hand. I didn't give to be noticed, at least that's what I told myself. I gave because it felt like love. Like maybe, just maybe if I kept showing up, they'd finally see me as more than the fallback plan. Rachel, on the other hand, was the sparkle. She always had a flair for making scenes. Failed classes? It was the professor's fault. Broken friendships? They were jealous. Every family event revolved around her. Her job drama, her on and off boyfriend, her endless crises. Mom called it personality. I called it convenient, because no matter how much mess Rachel created, someone else always cleaned it up. Usually me. And still, I thought this year might be different. She'd been late on rent 3 times, Mom said. Behind on utilities. She was trying, but work had been slow. So I did what I always did, quietly made things easier. 3 months of covered rent. No fanfare, just a gesture of support. And she took it, held it in front of everyone, and mocked me. She's not needed. Like kindness was embarrassing. Like being dependable was pitiful. Like the worst thing a woman could be was useful. I watched them all laugh. My mother, my cousins, even my aunt, the one who cried when I helped pay off her medical bills 5 years ago. In that moment, I wasn't humiliated. I was done. Because when someone shows you what your presence means to them, believe them. And when they laugh at the version of you that's always carried their weight, you don't argue. You put it down. For good. After I walked out of that house, I didn't cry. Not in the car. Not when I got home. Not even the next morning when I opened my email to a long message from my mother titled, "Let's not overreact." I read every word. Rachel was just being playful. You know how sarcastic she is. We all appreciate you, even if we don't always say it. Every line was a masterclass in deflection. Not once did she acknowledge what happened. Not once did she ask how I felt. It was damage control. Rehearsed. Hello. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my bank app, and I started pulling plugs. First, the automatic payment for Rachel's car insurance. She hadn't even known I was covering it. Mom had quietly asked me to help her get on her feet months ago. Canceled. Next, the savings account I set up for Dad's side business, the one where I was the only one contributing. Closed. Then, the shared family Netflix and Spotify plans I was managing. Small things, but symbolic. Gone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't out for revenge. I just realized I was done volunteering for a family that didn't even see me as a person, just a resource. Over the next few days, the silence got louder. Rachel didn't reach out. Not once. No apology, no explanation, no accountability. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how free I felt. The absence of obligation. The way my calendar felt suddenly lighter, my evenings longer. I cooked for myself, took walks, slept better. I kept waiting for the guilt to creep in, the pull to make things right. But it didn't come. Instead, I found myself breathing, really breathing, for the first time in years. Then, 5 days after Christmas, the text started. "Emily, have you been paying Rachel's insurance? Hey, why isn't the card working for the business account? Did you cancel Netflix?" I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't being petty. I was being clear. Because people like that, the ones who never say thank you, who joke about your generosity like it's pathetic, they don't understand boundaries unless you draw them in permanent ink. I had drawn mine. Thick, sharp, uncrossable. And for the first time, they were starting to realize I hadn't just taken back a gift. I had taken back me. You know, what happens when you stop feeding a system that runs on your silence? It starts to starve. At first, they don't notice. It's a missed payment here, a forgotten login there. Small things, inconveniences, but then the gaps widen. And when you've been the glue, the quiet engine behind the scenes, your absence starts to echo. I didn't post a dramatic announcement. No, cryptic Instagram, quote about boundaries or healing. No long emails saying, "I'm done," because I wasn't giving them anything else to hold on to, not even closure. I just stopped. I pulled out of the family's group vacation planning thread, removed my card from the travel booking site, unsubscribed from the newsletter Rachel was running, the one I'd built for her, branded for her, paid monthly fees to keep live. She emailed me twice. "Hey, the payment didn't go through. Can you just update your card? You've always handled that." I didn't reply, and when she tried again, this time from a different address, I blocked her. I wasn't being cruel. I was being consistent. Consistency was something I'd always given freely, even when I didn't deserve it. I showed up. I remembered birthdays. I sent flowers when they were sad, food when they were sick, and money when they were in a tough spot. It had never been reciprocated. Not once. The Christmas before this one, I paid for the entire dinner, catered. Rachel had shown up 3 hours late, snapped a selfie in front of the tree I decorated, and left before dessert. No one thanked me. No one even noticed when I stayed behind afterward to clean alone. This time they noticed everything. I heard from my cousin Mia that the group business account was locked. I had removed myself as co-owner. Apparently, the legal paperwork I'd filed months earlier had just taken effect. I was no longer financially tied to any of them. Mom tried calling, twice in one day. I didn't pick up. Then she sent a message. Emily, I don't understand what you're doing. We're family. Can't we move on from one awkward moment? One awkward moment? That wasn't awkward. That was betrayal with a bow on top. They humiliated me when I offered help, not because they misunderstood me, but because my usefulness threatened their egos. They were comfortable with me giving, as long as I stayed small while doing it. Now, I was stepping out of the background, and they hated that more than they ever appreciated the help. So I let the silence grow. I let them squirm. I let the weight they used to toss on me fall squarely back into their own hands. And I didn't say a single word, because some messages don't need to be sent. They're felt. The funny thing about people who take you for granted? They don't realize what you do until it stops being done. 10 minutes after I left that Christmas gathering, I imagine it still smelled like ham and cinnamon, still looked festive, still sparkled under the tree I helped decorate. But the mood? It shifted. My cousin Mia called me the next day to check in. She's the only one who ever saw through Rachel's nonsense, quietly, never out loud. She said, Emily, what happened after you left? I've never seen them panic like that. Apparently, someone finally opened the family Venmo account to confirm the vacation deposit, only to find the balance at zero, because I'd pulled my share and locked them out. Then, someone realized Rachel's rent hadn't been paid and wasn't going to be. Then the Netflix logged out. Then the Spotify. Then the shared grocery delivery plan Mom had been using on my dime for the past year stopped working mid-order. At first, they thought it was a tech glitch. Then reality crept in like a cold draft. They had laughed. They had mocked. And then they watched the foundation they never noticed crack, piece by piece, with no one to stop the fall. They weren't sad I left. They were terrified that I meant it, that I wasn't going to come back like I always did, that I wasn't going to accept the fake apologies, the half-hugs, the excuses like, you know how Rachel is. This wasn't Emily having a moment. This was Emily vanishing and taking the structure with her. By New Year's Eve, the family group chat was a war zone. I didn't read the messages directly, but Mia sent me a few screenshots. Rachel was playing victim. I said one thing and she overreacted. It's not like I burned her house down. Mom defended her as always. It was a joke. We didn't mean it. She's being dramatic. Dad said nothing. Of course he didn't. That was always his role, the passive background figure. Loud during football games. Silent when things actually mattered. Then the tone changed. Emily, please. We're a family. We need to talk. And the word they mocked me for, needed, suddenly turned on them. Because what they were really saying was, we don't know how to function without you. We don't know how to clean up the mess now that you've stopped holding the mop. We don't know how to be a family unless you're fixing it for us. And I didn't respond. Not once. Instead, I bought a new planner. One with no birthdays marked. No family dinners circled. No reminders to send flowers or transfer money or set up Zoom calls for game night. Just blank days, waiting to be filled with people who saw me as more than a convenience, wrapped in polite silence. People who wouldn't laugh when I gave, who wouldn't use gratitude as a weapon, who didn't see boundaries as betrayal. Let them shout. Let them scramble. Let them realize the gift they threw away. Because they made one thing crystal clear. I wasn't needed, and that was the most liberating thing I'd ever learned. The first voicemail came 2 weeks after Christmas. It was my mother. Her voice was careful, the kind she used when she was afraid she might not be in control anymore. Emily, I just want to talk. We miss you. Your sister. Well, she regrets what she said. You know how she is. Please call me back. I didn't. Not because I was being cruel, but because I didn't believe her. Regret in our family was just code for say something nice so she'll come back and fix this. A few days later, Rachel posted an Instagram story. Just a picture of her Christmas tree, still up in mid-January with a caption. Not all presents are what they seem. Some people are just too sensitive. Subtle in her usual way. A jab in glitter. She wasn't sorry. She was embarrassed. Because her support system, the one she never acknowledged, had pulled the plug. I muted her account, blocked my mom's number. I told myself it was temporary. But the longer the silence stretched, the more I realized how peaceful life could be when I wasn't constantly cleaning up behind people who never said thank you. Instead of phone calls about someone's overdue rent or small emergencies, my days were full of quiet, calm. I went to work, came home, cooked for myself, started reading again, signed up for a weekend ceramics class just because I liked the idea of making something with my hands. I wasn't waking up dreading messages. I wasn't planning my calendar around other people's drama. I wasn't budgeting to fix someone else's crisis. It was the kind of freedom you don't even know you're missing until you taste it. Mia, my cousin, the only one who didn't jump on the bandwagon, invited me to brunch one Sunday. I almost didn't go, but I'm glad I did. She didn't pressure me, didn't say you should talk to them. She just asked how I was. And when I said, honestly, peaceful, she smiled and said, yeah, I can tell. I think that was the moment I knew I wasn't going back. Not in a dramatic, slam the door kind of way. Just quietly, like someone stepping into a room where they finally belong and realizing they never needed permission to be there. Around that time, I got a promotion at work. A big one. I was offered a lead role on a project I'd been hoping for all year. The funny part? Rachel found out before I told anyone. She emailed me. Just 2 lines. Congrats. Guess you're doing fine without us. That last word, us, stuck out. Because she meant without her. Without Mom. Without the whole web of people who had kept me small while pretending it was love. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because Rachel was finally learning what it felt like to not be needed. And I was learning something, too. Love that comes with strings isn't love. It's control. Support that only shows up when you're useful isn't support. It's dependence in disguise. I had spent most of my adult life trying to prove I belonged at a table that had no seat for me. Now, I was building my own table, and it wasn't made of guilt. It was made of peace. That Christmas, I didn't wait for an invitation. I didn't check the group chat. Didn't browse holiday flights. Didn't wonder what theme my mother had chosen for the decorations or whether Rachel would post another curated carousel of perfectly lit chaos. I just planned something for myself. I hosted Christmas Eve in my apartment. Not the biggest space, but it held warmth like a second skin. I hung string lights across my kitchen window, baked cinnamon rolls from scratch, and sent out invites to the people who had actually shown up for me that year. For guests came. Mia, of course, with a bottle of wine and a laugh that filled the entire room. Jules, a co-worker turned friend who once brought me soup when I was sick. Nina and Leah, a couple I'd met at my ceramics class, who'd never once made me feel like a third wheel, just a welcome human. There were no cameras. No passive-aggressive jabs over the mashed potatoes. No competition for who gave the best gift. Just joy. Chosen joy. The kind you can feel humming beneath a quiet dinner table. At one point, Jules raised her glass. To Emily, she said, for showing us what peace really looks like. I didn't know how to respond, because for so long I had been the one in the background, organizing, fixing, giving, not the one being toasted. I didn't want to cry, but I did. Just a little. Not from sadness. From arrival. I had landed somewhere real. That night, after everyone left and the dishes were done, I sat by the window with a blanket and a mug of peppermint tea. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Lights blinking, cars passing, laughter rising up from a nearby bar. I didn't miss my family, not even a little. And that was a truth I never thought I'd be able to say without guilt. I used to think peace came after forgiveness, that I had to go back, explain myself, smooth things over, convince them to see my worth. But peace had nothing to do with them. It came the moment I stopped waiting for them to change. I checked my phone once before bed. 1 missed call, my mother. No voicemail, just the timestamp. I turned off my phone. No part of me wanted to hear her voice. Not anymore, because silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's love for yourself. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to sunlight through my blinds and no expectations pulling me out of bed. I made breakfast, read a book, wrote in my journal. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. Because the greatest gift I gave myself that holiday was space. And in that space, I found everything I'd ever wanted. Not perfection, not applause, just peace. It's strange how one sentence can stay with you. She's not needed by this family. Rachel said it like a joke, like it was funny how I kept trying to matter. And maybe it was to them. Maybe my kindness, my effort, my loyalty was just background noise in a house that only heard what it wanted. But that sentence, it never left me. At first it stung. Then it stuck. And eventually it started to sound like freedom. Not needed. For years, I mistook being needed for being loved. I thought that if I was useful, if I handled the details, absorbed the blame, smoothed the cracks, then maybe I was valuable. It's a lie we don't talk about enough. That being depended on is the same as being appreciated. It's not. Being needed meant I could never rest. Being needed meant I couldn't say no without being called difficult. Being needed meant the second I pulled back, the whole system trembled, and they blamed me for the collapse. So when I walked out of that house on Christmas Day, I didn't just take back an envelope. I took back my identity. I let go of the role they assigned me, the helper, the fixer, the one who never needed anything, but was always expected to give everything. And I stepped into something much more powerful, myself. Now, I wake up in a home where no one expects me to save them. I walk through rooms that don't echo with guilt. I laugh, often and loudly, with people who would never reduce me to a punchline. I give still, but from a full place, not a bleeding one. And when I choose to give now, it's a gift, not a transaction in a game I never agreed to play. I don't know what my family says about me these days. Maybe that I've changed. Maybe that I'm cold. Maybe that I overreacted. But I'm not cold. I'm clear. And clarity is the thing they never expected me to find because they relied on my confusion to keep me in line. They used to throw family at me like a chain. But family, when it's built on shame and control, isn't sacred. It's a trap. I stopped calling it family the day they laughed when I tried to help. And I haven't called since. I'm not bitter. Truly. In fact, I wish them well. I hope they figure out how to keep their lives afloat without someone bailing them out behind the scenes. I hope Rachel figures out how to live without performing superiority. I hope my mother finds out what it feels like to earn forgiveness, not demand it. But none of that is my responsibility anymore. Because they were right. I'm not needed. And I don't want to be. Because I finally learned. Being needed is the price you pay when people don't know how to love you unconditionally. And being free? That's what happens when you stop buying your seat at a table that was always too small. The last thing I did that year was frame something I wrote in my journal, just 4 lines. It hangs above my desk now. They laughed when I gave. I smiled when I left. I said nothing else. And they heard everything